All right. So good evening. Thank you so much for joining me for Agnew's first parent engagement event for our school year for this 24-25 school year. For those who may not know me, my name is Joe Young, our school principal, and our first parent engagement event for tonight on attendance, chronic absenteeism, and the truancy process. And so I want to share with all our families, those who are tuning in live tonight, as well as those who are watching it later on, about the attendance laws, the truancy process, and then what it means to be for a child to be chronically absent. On the screen, you will now see that we're going to advance and share just really quickly the introduction of the team that monitors attendance and tardies, the truancy process, and the chronic absenteeism data. On the left picture is Miss Brenda and Miss Bree. Brenda Mora is our school secretary, and then Brianna Cortez is our clerical assistant. Once again, that's me, a picture from a few years ago, but that's me, Joe Young, as the school principal. So for tonight, our agenda is to take a look at and just discuss about parent interactions, really talk about meaningful relationships that we have as adults or staff members to the students, but of course also the meaningful relationships between the staff and our community and our families. We'll also talk about attendance, truancy process, and then wrap up and do any question and answer sessions as well for those who are tuning in live. So the first one is just kind of a silent think time, and you can, for those who are joining in live, you can use the chat feature within Zoom to answer this question. Who is the teacher that you remember most? Remember the most and why? So some silent think time first. You can see Benjamin. Benjamin earlier had already shared with me some thoughts about his years as a student growing up, as a child growing up. So who is the teacher that you remember most and why? And so feel free to throw it in the chat box if you are joining live, or unmute if you'd like to share. I will share with you just my story about this teacher that I remember most and why, for my years of when I was a kid. So I actually attribute all my whole career as an educator to Mrs. Yee, my second grade teacher. And the reason for that is that in first grade, I was a really poor reader. I did not read it very well. The way that reading instruction was done at that time was a technique called round robin reading. The whole class had the same book, and we were going around in a way of a circle, and each student was to read a paragraph. And so for me, I was a pretty poor reader as well. I was not good at decoding. I did not have all the sounds, the letter sounds, and also the consonant digraphs, and just the understanding of how to blend sounds together. Um, so I would count ahead which paragraph was mine, and I would practice in my head, practice in my head. Of course, you can imagine what that it resulted in is that I was not listening and not paying attention to the story so far. And so reading comprehension was just out the door, right? I did not know what was going on. And then when it got to the time for my paragraph to read, because I was not a very strong reader, I still stumbled on some words. I couldn't read it, I couldn't pronounce it. And I was also an English language learner. English is my second language. And so my classmates did say the word sometimes, or the teacher would say the word, but every single time somebody would correct me, I just wilted. I kept feeling like, oh, I don't know how to read. I don't know how to read. I'll never learn how to read. In second grade, Mrs. Yee, my second grade teacher, saw that need in me and kept me in at recess, at lunch, after school. Told my mom that I'll pick up Joe a little later. I want to work with him with his reading. And of course, as a kid, I hated it. I hated spending extra time, but she caught me up in reading. And so that experience and Mrs. Yee, who just caught me up in reading, really propelled me into wanting to be a teacher. And when I went through the rest of my school years as a student and then into college and then applying to the teaching credential program, I told that story. And I wanted to be a second grade teacher, just like to follow in Mrs. Yee's footsteps to help students learn to read. But my teaching credential program at UC Davis placed me with my student teaching in a first grade class. And I was so disappointed as to why, but I saw so much reading development that needed to be in first grade, or that is first grade, that I realized that's what I missed as a first grade student. And yes, though I wanted to follow Mrs. Yee as a second grade teacher, it was more about teaching, helping kids learn to read like she did for me. And so that was a wonderful experience for me. And Mrs. Yee will always be that teacher I remember most because of spending the extra time with me, building that connection, helping me understand. At that time, I didn't really quite know why, because I was having extra time with her, but it really helped me with the rest of my life. And so that's something that I wanted to just start us off with, is to just talk about how every single child, every single student, all of us at one point in our lives we were influenced by somebody, and it's based on that type of relationship, that caring, thoughtful, committed relationship that an educator has on all students. And I really consider it my privilege and pleasure to be able to work with a staff, such an amazing, dedicated staff at Agnew, because all of us here at Agnew, we care and show our commitment to students, and we're student-centered and student first. And so with all things, it's based on relationships. That relationship, of course, also extends into the staff and parent relationship. This is the week of our fall conference week, and in conferences, it really establishes that partnership to be able to speak about goals and identify goals for every single child. And then throughout the year, maintaining the communication, problem solving, collaborative and collective problem solving into what's the challenge, the struggle, and then working together in it. That's always about that collaborative, healthy, committed, and communicative relationship. Like all relationships, sometimes we go through challenges, but that commitment is always there. And so committed relationships between educator to student. We also foster great relationships between students, but then of course for staff to parents as well. So tonight's focus again is the importance of helping our children succeed, have a safe and successful school year. And what that really entails is to make sure that they are at school. The importance of on-time regular attendance. September is also National School Attendance Awareness Month. And so in the family newsletters, I've shared the importance of that, having our students on time at school daily, because in order for us to be able to teach them, we want to make sure that they're here. So our next slide talks about how attendance. In a school year, there are 180 days. And that first graphic on the left, it does again say 180 days in a year, in a school year, every single school year, 180 days. We always talk about on time and daily attendance because that's an important thing to create that structure, the routines. When students are late or come in tardy, there's challenges at sometimes with the transition time, missing out on what might have happened. If they're of course absent any particular day, there's challenges with what they have missed in previous days and stuff. So that's the first important thing about the attendance. And then second thing is the truancy process. Within the truancy process, the next slide will talk more about the truancy process, but truancy, again, like I said, the next slide will explain a little bit more about it, but within the truancy process, there is the letters underneath the SARB, that stands for Student Attendance Review Board. So there's a SARB hearing, and then beyond in that, I will share more details about what happens if a child is absent. With unexcused absences, or also tardy to 30 minutes more, it enters the truancy process. And those are notification letters that get sent to the families, parents, because of course, as parents, we are the responsible party to help our child get to school. The last graphic on the right does talk about also chronic absenteeism, and that is 10% of the enrolled days. This school year, in the most recent family newsletter, or maybe 2 weeks back, I talked about chronic absenteeism in that it's 10% of the enrolled days. So that means, let's take, for example, if a child has been in school, there have been 30 days of enrollment that they've been enrolled, and they've been eligible, or there's 30 days of school. If they miss 3 days, that constitutes 10% of their enrolled days, which puts them into the chronic absenteeism data. That was the most recent, or that's 2 weeks ago when I spoke about how we've been in school. I think at that time I said 26 total school days already. As a total, there are some families and students that have enrolled since the first day of school. So their number of enrolled days might have been like 22 or less, but just by 2 or 3 absences that are unexcused already puts them into the chronic absenteeism data. So I'll share a little bit more in the future slides as well, but the very next slide talks about that truancy process and explains that. At the very top, I want to first off specify that it's something called attendance events, the challenges that we want to talk about, and that is a tardy for 30 minutes or more. Anytime that your child comes in with school starting at 8:15, if they are coming in at 8:45 or later, that will be considered a tardy. That's of course 30 minutes or more, and it will count towards the truancy process. Tardies of 5-10 minutes or so is still of course a tardy, but it doesn't count towards the truancy process. So an attendance event is tardy of 30 minutes or more, or an unexcused absence. And the most common form of unexcused absence, like I mentioned in a family newsletter and in the frequently asked questions document on our school website, is a family trip. In all our Parent Square communication, we always encourage families to take family trips during the naturally scheduled breaks in the school year. Thanksgiving break, winter break, February break, spring break, and obviously, of course, summer break, because anytime that you take family trips during the school year, those are unexcused absences. Excused absences, the most common form, of course, are health-related things. Where they're sick, if there's a need to go to the doctors, if there is a dental appointment, all of that are excused. If a child is sick for more than 3 days, also a part of our policy is that we then would need a doctor's note. 3 consecutive days, we need a doctor's note to be able to justify or verify that those 3 days are excused absences. So if there are those attendance events of a tardy of 30 minutes or more, or an unexcused absence, you'll see in the first circle on the left, it says truancy letter number 1. And again, this is a notification letter that a combination of 3 attendance events, there will be an automatically generated truancy letter number 1 that gets emailed to the parent. And again, it's a combination of the 3 events. Either all 3 are unexcused absences, 2 unexcused, 1 tardy of 30 minutes more, 1 unexcused, 2 tardies of 30 minutes or more, or all 3 are 30 minutes or more tardiness. The first letter is a notification letter, just letting the family know that your child is in the truancy process because of those 3 events. And it's to let you know about wanting to make improvements, seeing improvements in the attendance records and attendance data. After the first letter, it actually speeds up really rapidly in that the very next attendance event, the 4th one, will result in an automatically generated attendance or truancy letter number 2 that again gets emailed. And a result of that also is a phone meeting. It can also involve an in-person meeting with me, where we speak about what's been the cause of it, for me to be able to understand what might have happened and to reteach or explain to the parents the truancy process and to make a plan to make the attendance record better moving forward. Once again, the process does speed up because on the right side of the screen with the 3rd circle, it says truancy letter number 3. And that is automatically generated and emailed to the parents once there is a 5th attendance event. And that is considered the final notification, after which then all the records, all the parent communication from the letter number 1, the phone meeting, my notes from the phone meeting or the in-person meeting gets submitted to the student services department at our district level. And then the SARB, which again stands for Student Attendance Review Board, there is a hearing where you as a parent would be appearing with the coordinator of student services, the district's our staff's wellness coordinator, to be able to support you as a parent as well as the child if there's some social or resources that you might need some support with. There's also the district social worker and other staff members from the Student Services Department at that SARB hearing to understand what's been going on, to speak about the efforts that you as a parent have been doing, as a school have been partnering with you as well. And then at the end of the meeting, an attendance contract is generated where as a parent, you'll be signing it to say, yes, I agree to these next steps on concrete ways to make the attendance record get better. And if it gets better, then that attendance contract just gets filed into the your child's report, and it just stays there because what we want to see is improvement. The challenge then is that if your child's attendance records don't improve, then all that paperwork can actually go into the district's attorney's office. I think it used to be called, well, it used to be called care court, where you do need to appear in front of a judge, the district's attorney, to be able to speak about what's going on. It is the laws of our state of California's Department of Education for students to be in school. And again, like I said, parents are the responsible party. And so you'll be appearing in front of a judge and the district's attorney's office to face even more severe messaging and consequences. I will say this is my 7th year as a principal. In the previous 6 years, I've never had to, there's never been a family that got to that point, but I've definitely heard situations and stories from other, in past years, from other principals that I've worked with. Student Services Department, of course, has encountered a lot of that. So all of which you can see back on the screen is that there are the notification letter number 1, truancy letter number 2, with creating a plan for a conversation with me, the final notification, the SARB hearing, and we certainly don't want to get to any point beyond that. So that's our truancy process. It does get pretty rapid, but again, the main point of all of this is to have our students at school on time with daily attendance. Back to that first earlier point about chronic absenteeism, again, it's missing 10% of the enrolled days. That part also results in an automatically generated 10% letter, and that's what we refer to it. So again, it's yet again a notification letter saying that your child is in the chronic absenteeism category for missing 10% of the enrolled days. In the most recent weekly update, I believe, I also said that with each passing day that they're present, that percentage will decrease away from that 10%. And so as our students are present, come to school, they can actually get out of that chronic absenteeism data or category. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. They can get out of the chronic absenteeism category. I think, did I say truancy? I might have said. However it is, with every single passing day of being present, then that percentage will change. One thing to keep in mind, that because every school year is 180 days, immediately if a child is out 18 days, that already constitutes chronic absenteeism. And that if a child is out 18 days at some point in the school year with many more days to come, they will forever be in the chronic absenteeism category, unfortunately. So that's really important to be at school every single day. Chronic absenteeism is about 10% of the enrolled days, no matter if it's excused or unexcused. And that's really an important distinction because that is in the California Department of Education that really, of course, wants the students at school. It does recognize that it's just out of all the enrolled days of absences, excused or unexcused. With excused absences, as I mentioned, students who are sick, we of course want them to stay home so that the illness doesn't spread to our other students, and it will count as an absence. So in those situations, if a child is out for multiple days, beyond 18 days, and they're all health related, though your child is considered chronically absent, we have that data to be able to speak to our student services department, really have that fine tuning of understanding the context. So really, again, if a child's sick, we want them to stay home so that the illnesses don't spread. But as soon as they're able to, and that's it with close consultation with your child's pediatrician, our district's health team, our school nurse, as well as our health assistant, get them back in school because it's important to have them here so that we can teach them. There is also one other letter that does get sent out as well, and that's the excessive tardies notification letter. And that's looking at patterns of tardies that is sent out on a regular basis, perhaps once every 2 weeks, as Miss Brianna, Miss Brenda, and I monitor for students and their tardiness as well. Because again, school starts at 8:15, meaning that's the day, that's the time the students need to be ready to go in their seats in line. We have an 8:10 warning bell, and that's the warning bell to be able to say, oh, yep, hustle in, get to the line, because at 8:15, that is the start of the day. That 8:10 to 8:15 really is considered, that's the warning or the grace period, because really 8:15 is the start of the day. And so anytime that the child is tardy for a minute or two, that's still tardy. And we do look at patterns of tardiness, and then that excessive tardy letter does go out. And once again, it's a notification letter to notify the parents about the pattern of tardiness and to make steps to improve it. I have two final slides for the formal presentation or formal portion of this presentation, and then I will stop the recording and take any live questions and answers. Those who are joining or watching this later on, looking at the recording, feel free to send me an email, stop in and ask questions of Miss Brenda, Miss Brianna, of me, of course, to your child's teacher, so that they can be able to field your questions about the importance or your questions about attendance, truancy, chronic absenteeism, and this excessive tardies notification letter. Once again, there are two final slides. The first one is just really one that says thank you with our Agnew Elementary School Parent Engagement Night. This whole presentation will be linked to our school website, because the final slide has lots of resources that I've prepared to share with everyone. And the first cell has the SEUSD Student Services attendance webpage to read about the importance of attendance as it comes from our district's student services department. The top row center box is the California Department of Education truancy information. The top right box is our truancy frequently asked questions document that we've created a couple of years ago. Bottom right is the student attendance review boards and information about that. We also have this resource called Why Try Dropout Prevention Program. And in the bottom right is the attendance work. And it's an organization that provides lots of resources to educators as well as to parents about the importance of attendance. So again, this is the end of the formal presentation with the slides. I'm going to stop the recording in just a moment so I can take any live questions from those who have joined here now. And those who are watching this presentation later on, feel free to send me an email or stop by and ask Miss Brianna and Miss Brenda, as well as your child's teacher, of any questions to clarify the attendance, truancy, chronic absenteeism, excessive tardies related topics. Thank you guys so much for joining and tuning into this recording. And thank you. Keep your eye out for more parent engagement events throughout the year.